go.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Inspiring Connections, episode 19.
Yay.
How you doing, Misty?
Good, Marty.
Today's episode, we have a really great guest, and I think a really interesting and, really current topic, I guess, and about the social web and specifically about curation.
And our guest is the general manager and also head of social marketing for Internet Media Labs. We met her in New York and also in Vegas. And she's known as the Bacon Queen, which is so interesting.
Oh, yeah. And who are we talking about?
We're talking about Amy Vernon.
Yes, Amy Vernon. Now, she got her start. I think some people might remember her from the early days of Digg, digg.com, which was recently relaunched. It's a news aggregation and voting site. And she had some really interesting encounters, and she got several posts on the front page. And some of her posts were about bacon, and that's how we got into the Bacon Queen. Well, you'll hear about that during the show. But also Amy is an expert really in social curation, and we get into talking about that. What is social curation? How best to do it? Maybe what's the differences between social curation and just aggregation,
and also the tools
that you can use. And if you're new to social, what are some of the things that you should be looking out for and paying attention to? So get ready, sit back. We got a great 30-minute discussion with Amy. So without any further ado, let's get right into it with Amy Vernon. Amy, welcome to PodGM Live.
Hello.
It's great to have you with us. Why don't we get right into it with the questions? In your definition, what is social curation?
I actually really like the word curation because it already had a definition. It's not one of those like made up social media words. And if you think about it in a museum or an art gallery, curation is the act of finding quality pieces of art, basically pieces of quality content to put together in a collection and share with people. I mean, the whole point of a museum or an art gallery is for people to come there and see the collections that are put together. So I think when done right, social curation is basically the online, content, written, video, visual content version of that. And that's basically finding interesting articles or funny articles, images, videos, and pulling them together. And usually it's there's a lot of different tools you can use to pull together like things together. So all your cat videos here and all your bacon here and your social media infographics here and you can really sort of pull things together that way and share it with people.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to go off the board immediately and go a little further back in social curation history before Twitter, probably, very early days of Facebook. If everybody doesn't know, Amy really got her start on a site called digg.com. It's around today. It just recently relaunched, digg.com. It was one of the first real social news curation sites. And, Amy, you got pretty well known from digg.com. Can you tell us about those early days and kind of the Wild West, I guess, back then?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because to some people I was a latecomer to Digg, but I mean it was around for about a year before I joined it, and then I wasn't really active for probably the first 6 months to 8 months that I was on there. But compared to a lot of other people, I was there relatively early on, and I was definitely there during its heyday when you would get a front page submission on Digg and it would just bring servers down. My very first submission that hit the front page actually was from one of the blogs at our newspaper, and it brought the blog servers down at our paper. And basically what it was you submitted links to content that you found interesting, and there were different topics, and you would submit them in the topics, and people would vote them up, or which was digging them, or vote them down, which was burying them. And there'd be an algorithm that would sort of figure out what would make it to the front page, and that's where things really happened, because it was really a small subset of users who actively submitted and looked in the upcoming articles to vote up and down, whereas most people who went to dig went to the front page, and that's why you had the massive traffic that would bring servers down, because people knew that if it got to the front page, that people had more or less already curated it for them.
Right.
If it hit the front page, it was interesting. Now, it might not necessarily be interesting to them, because obviously they were all different topics, and maybe you were really into tech and you didn't care about entertainment, or you were really into sports and you didn't care about tech. But it had been curated to that point where other people had said, this is good, this is not good. And so the stuff that made it to the front page was generally really interesting or funny.
Now, along with voting stories up and down, Dig had and still has a conversational and comment thread component to it. Do you remember, does anything come to mind as far as a real memorable post that made it to the front page and generated a lot of discussion, or a lot of maybe controversy or whatever? Maybe one of your posts?
Well, there was one post of mine, and it actually sort of kicked off my whole connection to bacon, because I had sort of noticed that people on Dig had an not unreasonable, but perhaps an extraordinary affinity for bacon. So I was curious to see if I submitted a photo of bacon that was literally just a photo of bacon, if it would hit the front page. So I found a very nice close-up of 3 strips of cooked bacon on Flickr, and I submitted it. And I thought it wasn't going to hit the front page, but at about 23 hours in, it did.
Oh my goodness.
Then it was the most dug thing I had ever submitted, and it got hundreds of comments. And what cracked me up about them was that, half the comments were, oh, damn it, Amy, now I have to put on some pants and go to the grocery store and buy some bacon. Or now I have to put on some pants and go cook some bacon, because I guess a lot of people were, reading Dig while not wearing pants. But then, like, every 10th comment or so was, what the F is this doing on the front page of Dig? It's a picture of bacon. And you know what? Like, they totally had a legitimate point.
Oh,
that made me laugh just as much. So that was probably the most amusing. But there were, I actually did something interesting with the comment threads, where there were, like any site, Dig was accused of being misogynistic and like anti-female. I made lots of great friends, male and female, on Dig. But of course there certainly were trolls there. So I would make a particularly girly type comment, something they would expect a woman to say,
right?
So that the trolls could sort of get all of their obnoxious stuff out of the way. So it didn't bother me at all, because I was trolling them.
Yeah, you're already playing the game. Yeah.
So then most of the time I didn't get those comments, because they kind of got it all out at those times when I got them to. So
wow,
that was my fun with
so
comments.
Bacon. That seemed to be a hot topic, and
that's why she's calling out the bacon.
Yeah, I think that leads to another topic here. And like Misty said, you're known as the Bacon Queen. How the heck? I mean, other than Dig, but the Bacon Queen.
What happened after that was just I found it amusing, so I just was always submitting photos of bacon, but I would choose really quality, like funny photos from Flickr, and then people would start asking me if I'd seen the latest bacon submission, and I'm like, it's not like I had an alert and an alarm that
Oh my goodness.
So let me know when they were bacon submissions, but I kind of did, because everybody would send me messages, and then I would find comments on submissions that I didn't even know about, where people were like, oh, I hope Amy Vernon digs this. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, what is even going on? So I realized I needed to do something. But there actually were already a lot of bacon blogs on Tumblr, Blogspot, etc. Some of them were serious foodie type things. and some of them were more, kitschy, like image.
Or even geeky, right?
Yes, yes. So I decided actually to curate my own bacon site, but basically it was like the Drudge Report for bacon.
Oh, okay.
I would, much like Matt Drudge, curates the big news, particularly political news. I had a Google alert that brought me, mentions of bacon and pork. And of course, pork, got lots of political stories, so I'd have to wade through a lot of that stuff. And I wouldn't post pork chop stories, but if it was about, pork prices or pork belly prices. So I actually really did curate that, where I had different sections. I've kind of let it lapse a little bit.
That's
oh
very,
my God.
very
Who knew that you could be a thought leader in bacon?
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's pretty good.
I certainly did not.
Okay, Amy, in your experience, what are some examples of curation done wrong?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the curation that's done wrong, but the thought of what is curation. Because for example, everybody sees these Paperly tweets every day on Twitter. And now there's nothing wrong in and of itself with Paperly. It is what it is, but that's not curation.
Right.
I mean, that's really aggregation. You can filter it to a degree, so you're filtering the terms, but it's still just pulling all of that in and sending it out. And I think that really when curation is done wrong, it's more a misunderstanding of what actually is curation. And so what it is that the person's doing when they're saying curating is they're actually just aggregating. And for aggregation. And there's nothing wrong with it, but there is something wrong with it when you're calling it curation, because curation really means you're putting thought into it and you're actually manually doing some work in there.
Okay, absolutely. Speaking of now Paperly, that's kind of an automated system to, I guess, aggregate. I think that's a very good and accurate description of it. Well, what does automation play? What kind of role does that take in curation?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I have sort of a love-hate relationship with automation. I think I do use some automated tools. For example, if this then that.
Okay. I love that.
They have. I used when Google Reader was still there. I had a recipe where. Can
you explain for everyone what if then that is?
Yeah, sure.
For people that don't know.
If this then that basically takes two separate things and automates the action between them. So you're basically saying, okay, if I take a photo and post it to Instagram, then it saves it to my Dropbox folder. And you can even do that with a hashtag. So it's only if I take a photo of Instagram hashtagged Limigram, because that's my dog, and so you can really automate the connection between whatever two things.
Right.
So in this case, I was using Google Reader, and I had blogs that I subscribed to through there. And if I starred them in my Google Reader, if this then that would then send it to my Buffer app. Okay. Then I would go to Buffer and I would clean up the tweet and make sure that there were appropriate @ handles in there or something, and maybe change the order of the tweets, because it would just send them in as I starred them. But that kind of automation is terrific, because instead of cutting and pasting and going between windows, I was able to just, really spend time looking through the content, hit star on the things I decided, then go over to the other app and go in there and clean it up, which really, that just saves a tremendous amount of time, particularly when you're doing that on a daily basis. So I think that sort of automation, I think that Triber, Triber gets a really bad rap, I think. That's a network where bloggers can connect in tribes and then share each other's content through those tribes. I think when it very first started, it was fully automated, and they quickly recognized that that was bad, because you don't necessarily want to share every single thing that people in your tribe do. So now it really is a manual process, but again, it automates the scheduling and the actual sending out of those tweets. So I like it because I go in maybe twice a day and I look through my tribes and I choose what I want to share. And sometimes, because I know the person and I know the topic, I may not read it until a little while after I've hit share, but it's still content that I am specifically choosing to share. And generally I've at least, skimmed through it before I send it. But if it's a Ginny Dietrich post about PR, I'm not going to wait to read that before I hit share, because I've read enough of her posts about PR that I know that that's a good one that I'm going to want to share. So why not get that just into the queue where it's sharing, and then I can read it, an hour later, and it doesn't make a difference. So that kind of automation, I think, is very useful, and it makes the curation process just smoother. You can't completely automate curation, because by definition, it's no longer curation.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can automate elements of it that just make it easier and make it not eat up as much of your time.
Yeah, I mean, the curation part.
Yeah, like what I do, I really look for stuff, but I still automate in such a way, I use Buffer and just schedule the time, but I don't use automatic RSS.
Yeah, so you don't use any kind of aggregation.
Aggregation,
Yeah, you're using
that's a very good
Buffer is
point.
great, because you tend to read things in chunks.
Yes.
Taking time, and you're looking for stuff. You don't want to send out 20 tweets at once. First of all,
Sure.
half the people follow you. You're like, see ya. And besides, then what are you going to do the rest of the day?
Yes.
It's good. It's great to have those tools where you can time that out, and that's exactly the kind of thing that I think makes curation a little easier and makes people more able to actually do a quality job with it.
Right. And also, with the social web being global, you're going to be people at different time zones, people with larger followings all around the world. They're not always going to be up when you're up maybe in the morning, reading the post that came out overnight, and you want to share some of the stuff. It's not necessarily time. It could go out anytime during the day, and you want to share it at different times. Yeah, the scheduling tools are great, but I guess it never replaces the human aspect of actually thinking through the content. Like Misty said, actually going through and saying, "Oh, that's nice." And I like what you said, Amy, about using a reader and starring or favoriting different things, and using a tool like if this then that. To kind of automate some of the processes as far as getting into a schedule and then going back and making sure that all the tweets are formatted correctly and scheduled for when you want it to go out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Speaking of tools, what are the tools that you can recommend for curating quality, content efficiently?
I still haven't found my preferred reader to replace Google Reader, because I was the diehard to the last day.
Have you tried any? What are some of the ones? Have you tried any?
Feedly.
Yeah, me too.
And the Dig Reader.
Okay.
And I've actually been meaning to check out the AOL RSS Reader, but once a couple of them have integrated with if this and that, then I'm gonna play with them a little bit more. I also use Plugio, plugg.io, and that is almost like a cross between. That's almost like what I did with If This and That, Buffer, and Google Reader, because I can have on a free account, I can have I think 4 or 5 RSS feeds in there. I can look through them, and then I can check off the ones that I want to send, and I actually have rules set up for some of them, so it always appends to the end of the tweet at whatever blog it is. Sometimes I'll still go in there and I'll add the author, or I'll change the wording of the headline because I haven't pulled a headline, but it's really nice because I'm able to automate, some of those things where every time I'm always going to add the publication name, so it just automatically appends that in there. So I definitely like that. Of course, Buffer app. Tumblr. I really love Tumblr.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely for my sort of humor-based content. That's where I find a lot of it, and also where I share most of it. And those are probably the biggest one. And I do use Triber as well.
How about have you tried? My favorite is Flipboard.
Yeah, have you tried Flipboard?
You know what, I have, and I have a couple of friends who've urged me to get back into it recently, and I've been seeing all of the new magazines that people have been doing, and I love them. So I've been watching it more recently before I get back into it, because I really want to know what I want to do with it. But there is actually on Facebook a group that a friend of mine, Aida Boucheron, on Twitter. She's Aida of Nubia, and she started this Flipboard group and asked a couple of us to help just admin it. And it's definitely, like I said, right now I'm sort of back in the paying more attention to it before I dive back in, because I think they're beautiful. I remember the first time I looked at Flipboard and I was like, oh my God, Twitter is gorgeous. But it looks best on an iPad.
Yeah.
And my iPads have sort of been usurped by other family members. So now that it's on desktop, I think that, there's a little more room for me to get back into it. Because on an iPhone, I mean, let's face it, it's a little small. It's not meant for.
Yeah, a little cramped.
Screen. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny when you mentioned the iPad, because I mean, Misty knows this. Every morning I get up, I grab the iPad. The first site or the first app I launch usually is Flipboard, and it just is it's almost like reading the morning newspaper. It's basically the same thing as RSS to a degree, but it's much prettier. And it kind of reminds you of the days of it's really an interactive newspaper that's always changing. So it's really it's fun. I mean, it's fun to read and interact with. You mentioned Tumblr before, and Misty and I were talking about this before we came on live this past week, where we were formulating the questions, and we talked a lot about social curation. And then there's this whole thing about, especially in the blogging world, about people literally just copying content as their own, or reblogging, and I guess there are certain lines and certain balances there. And I know Tumblr, it's really reblogging and resharing. What are your thoughts about the whole reblogging thing?
Well, on a site like Tumblr, it's part of the community and part of what the community is, and so as long as you don't remove the credit of who you reblogged it from. And Tumblr itself, just as an application, as a platform, has gotten a lot better about making it so that whoever it's originally reblogged from, at least, can't be removed from there.
Right.
So it's a part of the expectation, and it's a part of what the platform is. So in a case like that, if someone gets upset that they're reblogged, I can understand them getting upset about being reblogged if their credit is stripped away.
Right.
They've added to it and that part is ignored. But that's the only thing I ever see people upset about on Tumblr. They love when they're reblogged and shared all over the place. I think that cases where there are a lot of these sites, and I don't really know what their game is other than SEO, and they probably just add in contextual links. And, that's sort of like the bad, dark side of SEO that the reputable SEO people never go anywhere near. But where they just copy paste articles wholesale, sometimes often even with a byline, and often they'll still link back.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I've seen it. I've seen it with our stuff. I'm sure you've seen it with your stuff, too. Yeah.
And it's that... I even to a degree have a problem with what HuffPost does, because I feel like they take the meat of the article and there's not so much more worth clicking through for. And I think that's a type of, and that is curation, but it's curation meant to bring you to their site, not to really, help anyone who brought stuff there. Whereas, a lot of people are like, oh, Matt Drudge, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? The guy takes a headline.
Right.
And if you want to know anything beyond that headline, you're clicking through to that website.
Right.
Yep.
Which is a really a very high quality curation to me, because he's giving you enough of an idea in the headline. He might change it so it gives a better idea of what you're clicking through to. But so it really depends how it's done.
Yep.
I think, in the Tumblr type of case, that's a part of what it is.
Mm-hmm. And
as long as you're playing by the rules of Tumblr, then you're good.
Yep.
And it's when you start doing that where you've, as you say, you've seen articles where they're just copy pasted somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because they still have your byline on.
That is weird. It's really
totally stealing my content, but my name is on it, so it's really easy to find.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a little strange. I've seen that. It's basically the whole thing with the linked byline, the whole bit, and I find that a little strange. Maybe a little black hat stuff going on there, but the Matt Drudge report, that's a great example of something very simple, just a page of links. That's really the definition of curation, where it links back to the original source, and again, it's very simple. Site. It's just a page with a bunch of hot hyperlinks, and you're ready to go. So and then it's one-stop shopping. So if you're interested in the political arena, it's a great site to go to. It generates a lot of discussion.
And Pinterest sort of followed the Tumblr with the whole repinning and
repinning.
I think where those sites where Tumblr and Pinterest sort of get a bad rap is that a lot of people just take content and post it on there without giving credit to the original source. But I don't know what the platforms could do to prevent that. I mean, to a degree, there is only so much they can do, and I think the communities over time do tend to police that. Right. There will always be cases where it gets through. Yep. But the communities do tend to police that and tend to call out the people who are using it improperly, because they don't want their experience to be, ruined.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and that's really the beauty of social curation, is that it is on the social web. You do it through communities, and the community can kind of run it, and kind of police themselves. So, yeah.
So, what's your advice to people new on social media in terms of curating quality content?
I think the biggest thing is to decide what you're curating. Okay. And now I have a lot of different interests, so I tend to go in a lot of different directions. But people sort of know that and expect that of me, and I've sort of always done that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but they're very science fiction, bacon, social media, journalism, and then, of course, the funny cat and dog videos.
That's quite a combination.
But I mean, those are my interests, or the things that amuse me, or the things that interest me. I was a journalist for 20 years. I moved into social media when that all, blew up. So obviously those are two areas that are, of strong interest to me. I've been a sci-fi fan for my entire life. I've had cats and dogs, and there is the bacon thing. So, but what I think is that you have to decide what is it that you're curating, and I think it's important for you to have some sort of connection to it, whether it's something you're interested in, or something that connected to what you do for a living. Now, I mean, one would hope that what you do for a living is something you're interested in. But there is obviously a difference between your interests and your career. So I think that you need to really say to yourself, okay, what am I interested in? I love hockey. Okay, then curate really great stuff about hockey or your team. And there's so much stuff out there about everything. And then, find the best sources. And I would say find the best sources initially, but then start looking at where they're getting. And I'm kind of loyal in the sense that I don't want to forsake the people who led me to the primary sources. So, as long as they're giving credit properly to the original sources, I still want to share from them. But I'm also looking at those primary or secondary sources as well for other things that maybe didn't strike them.
Right.
Where maybe I end up posting before they did sometimes. So you really want to figure out what you're interested in and then figure out where the best of that content is, whether it's a news site or a humor site or a network like Cheeseburger or Tumblr, or a platform like Reddit or Dig or StumbleUpon. I mean, initially that's where I got most of my stuff was from Dig, just because I was there all the time. So I saw all the stuff and so much of it I wanted to share. And, and I still also read some journalism blogs, so I was always getting stuff from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the, Amy, I'm not sure if you get the same question, but one of the questions I get from people that are new to social and want to know how to build community and maybe share information that they're interested in. I think they think that, oh man, I might, in fact, I know a guy who I'm working with right now. He's a very big sports fan. In fact, he's like a walking encyclopedia, and he's also loves Elvis. I mean, two completely opposite things. And I guess the message is there's nothing too niche. In fact, the more niche you can get, the better, because you can probably build a more passionate community and find people that are really into what you are also interested in. And I think people think that, no, nobody can be interested in science fiction movies of the 50s or whatever, or however niche you want to go. But I'm telling you, it's a global audience out there, and there are people interested in what you're interested in.
Plus,
and you will be surprised.
You will gain a lot of friends too. Like I remember before, we never thought that the 90s music was a hit, or the 80s music, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then we just follow the hashtag.
Yeah.
And now I'm friends with majority of them, right?
There you go.
Like,
absolutely.
And you raise a really interesting point with hashtags, because they are, I can't believe I didn't really bring them up, but they're one of the best curation tools out there. Because now, I mean, they're everything on Twitter. They're the only way to make, other than any lists that you create of people you follow. Yep. They're the only way to find anything on Twitter anymore. They're on Pinterest. They're on Tumblr. They're now on Facebook. They are the social currency.
Plus, everywhere.
They're the currency of the social web, really. I did a panel on hashtags during Internet Week, I think it was, and it was hashtags, the atomic element of social. Yep. And one of the guests on the panel said that he looks at them, besides being a curation tool, they're also like a Shakespearean aside, so like in the plays, whenever the guy would like turn to the audience and say something like that, hashtags are like that. But you can sort, half the trending hashtags at any given time are the Shakespearean asides. And I love that analogy. I just thought that was so terrific. And they are, so the hashtags now they're on every platform, and you really can find what you're looking for. He doesn't even have to have separate accounts for his sports and his Elvis. Yeah. Yep. Just hashtag them.
Yeah, that's right.
They'll find the right audience.
And you'll be found. Yeah, it's funny because now the social web has grown so much. And there's so much information being posted every minute. You need some type of filtering system and some way to find what you're interested in. And I'm glad you mentioned hashtags. That's a very important tool, and it's spread to so many other networks as well.
Yeah, like whenever I want to watch a movie, even before you want to see what people are talking about, if it's really a good one. I remember The Conjuring it trended, but I just looked at the hashtag on Twitter and then saw like all the funny, scary stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Amy, it's been a very, very, very fast 30 minutes. Always is. Every week it seems like it's a fast. We get to really great discussions here. We want to thank you very much for coming on PodJam TV Live. We really enjoyed having you with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Man, that was a quick 30 minutes and a great interview with Amy Vernon. She really knows social curation, the social web. I mean, she started with Dig.
Plus great advice, and she offered a lot of really good tools.
Good resources, good tools, kind of good thought processes for people who also want to curate good information and kind of how to do it.
And for people who wants to follow and get to know Amy really well, just check out the show notes.
Yeah, all the information's right there. I guess that'll do it for another week of Inspiring Connection. But before we go, we do want to mention that the content for this episode and really most of the episodes of Inspiring Connections comes from a live show that we do every Sunday night, a video broadcast.
That's
we use
8:30
p.m. Eastern.
Sunday. Yep.
Right. We use Google Hangouts as our platform, and we embed it on podgym.tv/live. You can go right to that page.
And then if they want to ask questions and also participate in the conversation, they can use the hashtag ptvlive on Twitter.
Absolutely, and we invite you to do that. We have a really great community, folks that can watch it live. It's a lot of fun if you can join us live. If you can't, you can always, it's archived. You can watch it on the replay, and also certainly view and listen to this podcast as well. And as you know, this podcast is available at podgym.tv/Inspiring Connections. It's also available on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. And we also want to invite you to, if you like what you hear, what you see, head over to iTunes. Leave us a review and a rating. That would be great. And we do want to mention, we did get a 5-star rating this past week from our good friend Jared Easley.
Yeah, from Starve the Doubts.
Yes, and that's his podcast. And we really recommend that you check out Jared's podcast, Starve the Doubts. It's available at starvethedoubts.com. And it's a business-related podcast. He interviews entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And, we realize there are other podcasts out there like that, but Jared has a really interesting and unique approach, and we really invite, and I'll leave it at that. Great questions, and really invite you to check that out. So that's starvethedoubts.com.
And if you do leave us a 5-star rating, we'll give you a shout-out.
In a future episode, absolutely. Yes. So thanks to Jared for doing that. And I think that'll do it for us for another week of Inspiring Connections. We will see you next time.
Go.